The gunshot echoed through the night like a clap of thunder, jolting Prudence Lawrence from her fitful sleep as the stagecoach rattled over another rut in the road. She clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, heart hammering against her ribs as memories of that terrible night in Boston flashed before her eyes. The little bundle nestled beside her stirred, and Prudence quickly soothed her baby daughter back to sleep with gentle hushing sounds. Dawn was breaking on the horizon, painting the vast Texas landscape in hues of gold and amber. Her new life awaited in Terlingua if she could outrun the shadows of her past. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough that a woman could disappear if she tried hard enough. That's exactly what Prudence intended to do. At 23, she had already experienced more hardship than most faced in a lifetime. The death of her husband, the scandal that followed, the threats that eventually drove her to flee with her 6-month-old daughter. Emma, all of it pushed her toward this desolate corner of Texas, where she hoped to find anonymity and perhaps, if she dared to dream, a small measure of peace. "Terlingua coming up, madam," the driver called down. "Best prepare yourself. Ain't much to look at, but it's the last stop before we hit the Mexican border." Prudence nodded, though the driver couldn't see her. She gathered her meager possessions, one carpetbag containing all that remained of her former life, and cradled Emma close to her chest. The baby's warmth was a comfort in the cool morning air. When the stagecoach finally rolled to a stop in what passed for the town center, Prudence peered out the window with trepidation. Terlingua was indeed not much to look at, a scattering of adobe buildings, weathered wooden structures, and canvas tents stretched across the dusty landscape. The imposing Chizos Mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged peaks cutting into the cloudless sky. "End of the line," the driver announced, opening the door for her. "Welcome to Terlingua, Texas, madam." Prudence stepped down carefully, balancing Emma in one arm and her bag in the other. The bright sunlight momentarily blinded her after the dim interior of the coach. When her vision cleared, she found herself the object of curious stares from the handful of people milling about the street. "You got somewhere to stay?" the driver asked, already unloading the remaining luggage from the coach. "The advertisement mentioned work at the Mercantile," Prudence replied softly. "I was told there might be lodging available there as well." The driver nodded toward a squat building with a wooden sign that read, "Terlingua Mercantile and General Store." "That'd be Old Man Wilson's place." "Good luck to you, madam." He tipped his hat and turned back to his work. Prudence squared her shoulders and made her way toward the store, acutely aware of the dust already settling on her travel-worn skirts. Emma fussed in her arms, hungry and uncomfortable after the long journey. The bell above the door jangled as Prudence entered the Mercantile. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight outside, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to tools, fabric to ammunition. A grizzled man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from behind the counter. "Help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Mr. Wilson? My name is Prudence Lawrence. I wrote to you about the position." Recognition dawned in the old man's eyes. "Ah, the widow from back east. Yes, got your letter. Wasn't expecting you so soon." His gaze fell on Emma. "Didn't mention you had a little one." Prudence felt her heart sink. "Will that be a problem, sir?" Mr. Wilson scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Can't say it won't complicate things. Room upstairs is mighty small, and customers don't take kindly to a crying baby while they're trying to shop." "She's very well behaved," Prudence said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. "And I'm a hard worker. I'll do whatever is required." Before Mr. Wilson could respond, the bell jangled again as the door opened. A tall man ducked his head to enter, the brim of his cowboy hat shadowing his face. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt hung low on his hips, marking him as someone accustomed to the dangers of the frontier. "Morning, Owen," Mr. Wilson called. "Got that order of fence wire you been waiting on?" The newcomer nodded, then seemed to notice Prudence for the first time. He removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and Prudence guessed him to be in his early 30s. "Madam," he greeted her with a slight nod. "This here's Owen Baker," Mr. Wilson explained to Prudence. "Runs the Double-B Ranch about 5 miles outside town. Owen, this is Mrs. Lawrence. She's come all the way from Boston to take the position I advertised." Owen Baker's gaze was assessing but not unkind as it moved from Prudence to the baby in her arms. "Long way to travel with a little one." "Yes," Prudence agreed, unsure what else to say. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. "Thing is, Mrs. Lawrence, I'm having second thoughts about the arrangement. Store's busier than when I placed that advertisement, and with the baby and all." "I need this position, Mr. Wilson," Prudence interrupted, a note of pleading in her voice. "I've traveled a very long way, and I have nowhere else to go." An uncomfortable silence fell over the store. Owen Baker shifted his weight, glancing between Prudence and the storekeeper. "Seems to me," he finally said, his voice deep and measured, "that Mrs. Lawrence here deserves a chance, George. Can't be easy traveling all this way with hopes pinned on your word." Mr. Wilson looked embarrassed. "It's not that I don't want to help, Owen. Just don't see how it could work, is all." Owen seemed to make a decision. "I might have a solution, if Mrs. Lawrence is interested." He turned to Prudence. "My housekeeper just left to care for her ailing sister in El Paso. Place is in disarray, and I've got 3 young ones who need looking after. 7, 5, and 3. Lost their mama to fever 2 years back." Prudence stared at him, momentarily speechless. "You're offering me a position? As your housekeeper? And to help with the children," Owen added. "Pays fair room and board plus $30 a month. More than George here was offering, I'd wager." Mr. Wilson had the grace to look abashed. "Was only going to be 20. Prudence's mind raced. The thought of being alone on a ranch with this stranger and his children should have terrified her. But something in Owen Baker's steady gaze inspired trust. "The children need a woman's care," Owen continued, "and I reckon your little one might benefit from growing up with some playmates." I don't know what to say, Mr. Baker," Prudence stammered. "Say you'll give it a month's trial," he suggested. "If it doesn't suit either of us, I'll bring you back to town, no hard feelings." Prudence looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her chest. What choice did she have, really? The money she'd managed to save would barely last a week, and the mercantile position had been her only prospect. "A month's trial," she agreed, meeting Owen's gaze. "I accept your offer, Mr. Baker." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Good. We'll leave as soon as I load this wire. Got a wagon outside." As Owen and Mr. Wilson went to handle the fence wire, Prudence stood in the center of the store, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward salvation. Only time would tell. The journey to the Double-B Ranch took almost 2 hours over rough terrain. Owen Baker drove the wagon with confident ease, occasionally pointing out landmarks or offering bits of information about the area. Prudence sat beside him on the wagon seat, Emma sleeping in her lap, wrapped in a blanket against the dust. "Ranch has been in my family for 20 years, Owen explained as they crested a rise that offered a view of the valley below. "My pa came out here in '58, not long after they established the county. Built the place up from nothing. It's beautiful country," Prudence offered, taking in the vast expanse of rugged landscape stretching toward the mountains. "Beautiful, yes. Forgiving, no." Owen's hands were steady on the reins. Takes grit to make a life out here. I have grit, Mr. Baker, Prudence said quietly. More than you might think. Owen glanced at her, those blue eyes searching her face. Never doubted it, Mrs. Lawrence. Woman traveling alone with a baby has to have something inside her driving her forward. Prudence looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. What can you tell me about your children, Mr. Baker? The change of subject worked. Owen's face softened slightly. Jacob's the oldest. 7 now, serious like his pa. Then there's Elijah, 5, full of mischief but good-hearted. Little Sarah's just turned 3. Talks a blue streak when she's not being shy. They must miss their mother terribly, Prudence said, immediately regretting her words when she saw pain flash across Owen's face. Every day, he said simply. After a moment he added, What about your husband, Mrs. Lawrence? The war. Prudence had prepared for this question. Influenza, last winter. She lied smoothly. Emma was only a few months old. Owen nodded, accepting her story without question. I'm sorry for your loss. They fell into silence as the wagon descended into the valley. Eventually, the Doubleby Ranch came into view, a sprawling compound centered around a large 2-story house built of stone and timber. Several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn completed the picture. In the distance, cattle grazed on the open range. It's larger than I expected, Prudence admitted as they approached. Pa had big dreams, Owen replied. Built the house for the family he thought would follow. Just ended up being me. He guided the wagon into the yard. Home sweet home, Mrs. Lawrence. Before the wagon had fully stopped, the front door of the house flew open and 3 children tumbled out, racing toward them with excited shouts. Pa's back. Did you bring candy? Who's that lady, Pa? Owen set the brake and climbed down, lifting his youngest, Sarah, into his arms. The little girl, with blonde curls and her father's blue eyes, buried her face shyly against his shoulder. This here's Mrs. Lawrence, Owen explained to his children. And her baby Emma. Mrs. Lawrence is going to be our new housekeeper and help look after you scamps. Jacob, the oldest, regarded Prudence with solemn eyes. He had his father's features, though his hair was darker. Is she staying forever, like Mrs. Hendricks was supposed to? Owen shot Prudence an apologetic look. Mrs. Lawrence is staying for at least a month. After that, we'll see. Elijah, a wiry boy with a mischievous grin, peered up at Prudence from under a mop of sandy hair. Can your baby play yet? I want somebody to play with. Emma's still very small, Prudence explained, smiling despite her nervousness. But she'll grow quickly, and before you know it, she'll be running after you. Owen helped Prudence down from the wagon, careful not to disturb Emma. Jacob, show Mrs. Lawrence to the housekeeper's room. Elijah, help me unload this wire. The housekeeper's quarters turned out to be a comfortable room off the kitchen, with its own small sitting area and a bedroom large enough for a double bed and a cradle. The furnishings were simple but well made, and everything was reasonably clean, if a bit dusty. Mrs. Hendricks left in a hurry, Jacob explained as he showed Prudence around. Pa says her sister got real sick. I see, Prudence said, setting her carpetbag on the bed. Well, I'm sure we'll have everything sorted out in no time. Jacob lingered in the doorway, watching as she laid Emma on the bed and began to unpack her few belongings. My ma died, he announced suddenly. She got a fever and then she was gone. Prudence's heart constricted at the matter-of-fact way he delivered this devastating information. I'm very sorry about your mother, Jacob. That must have been terribly hard for you and your siblings. Pa cried, Jacob continued. I never saw him cry before that. He doesn't do it anymore. But sometimes he looks sad when he thinks we're not watching. Prudence knelt to be at eye level with the boy, Losing someone you love leaves a hole in your heart. It's okay for your pa to be sad sometimes. It just means he loved your mother very much. Jacob considered this, then nodded seriously. Did you love Emma's pa? The question caught Prudence off guard. Yes, I did, she said, the half-truth sticking in her throat. Good, Jacob decided. Everybody should be loved. With that profound statement, he turned and left the room, leaving Prudence to wonder what kind of man Owen Baker was, to have raised such a thoughtful child in such harsh surroundings. The first few days at the Double B Ranch passed in a blur of activity. Prudence threw herself into her duties, determined to prove her worth. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized the pantry, planned and prepared meals, and did her best to establish a routine for the children. Emma spent most of her time in a makeshift sling Prudence fashioned, allowing her to work with both hands while keeping her daughter close. Owen Baker was rarely in the house, occupied from sunrise to sunset with ranch work. When their paths did cross, usually at meals, he was unfailingly polite but distant. He answered her questions about the household and children directly but volunteered little about himself or his past. It was clear he was a man accustomed to keeping his own counsel. On the fourth evening, after the children were in bed, Prudence was darning a pile of socks by the fire when Owen came in from his last check of the livestock. He hung his hat on a peg by the door and stood for a moment, watching her work. "You're settling in well," he observed, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot Prudence kept warm on the stove. "The children make it easy," she replied. "They're wonderful, Mr. Baker. You've done a fine job raising them." A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "Done my best. Not always sure it's enough." He hesitated, then asked, "They're not giving you any trouble?" "Not at all. Jacob's so responsible. Elijah keeps us all laughing. And Sarah." Prudence smiled. "Sarah has appointed herself Emma's official protector. She sits beside the cradle and sings to her." Owen's expression softened. "Catherine, my late wife, she used to sing to them too." He cleared his throat. "House hasn't felt right since she passed. Better this past week, though." The compliment, indirect as it was, warmed Prudence. "Thank you, Mr. Baker. I'm glad I can help." Owen seemed about to say more when a cry came from Prudence's room, Emma waking for her night feeding. Prudence set aside her darning and rose. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Baker." He nodded. "Of course. Good night, Mrs. Lawrence." "Good night." As she fed Emma in the privacy of her room, Prudence found herself thinking about Owen Baker. There was a dignity to his grief, a steadiness to his character that spoke of inner strength. He clearly adored his children and worked tirelessly to provide for them. In another life, in other circumstances, he was the kind of man she might have. Prudence cut off that thought before it could fully form. She couldn't afford romantic notions, not with her past hanging over her like the sword of Damocles. Her priority had to be building a safe life for Emma, nothing more. Yet as she drifted off to sleep that night, Owen's blue eyes and rare smile followed her into her dreams. The weeks passed, and spring bloomed across the ranch. Wildflowers carpeted the valleys, and the days grew longer and warmer. Prudence found herself settling into life at the Double B with surprising ease. The children had accepted her presence completely, and even Owen seemed more relaxed around her, occasionally sharing stories from his day or discussing plans for the ranch. One evening in late April, almost a month after her arrival, Prudence was hanging laundry in the yard when she noticed a cloud of dust on the horizon. A rider was approaching fast, and from the way Owen straightened up from the corral fence and reached for his rifle, the visitor wasn't expected. "Get the children inside," Owen called to her, his voice tense. Prudence didn't question him. She quickly gathered Sarah, who was playing nearby, and called to the boys. Within moments, they were all in the house, the door barred behind them. Through the window, Prudence watched as a man rode into the yard and dismounted. He was dressed like a cowhand, but something about his manner put her on edge. Owen and the stranger spoke for several minutes, their conversation appearing increasingly heated. Finally, the man remounted and rode away, but not before casting a long look at the house. When Owen came inside, his expression was grim. "Is everything all right?" Prudence asked, keeping her voice low so the children, now playing in the next room, wouldn't hear. Owen ran a hand through his hair. "That was Pete Rollins. Works for the Sutton spread north of here. Says some cattle rustlers hit them last night. Made off with 20 head. He hesitated. "Rollins seems to think they might be heading this way." Prudence felt a chill. "Is that likely?" "Possible. There's an old trail through the hills that leads to Mexico. Cuts across the eastern edge of my property." Owen looked troubled. "I should ride out, check the boundary line." "Now? Alone?" Prudence couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. "Isn't that dangerous?" "Wouldn't be the first time I've dealt with rustlers," Owen said grimly. "But I won't engage them if I find them. Just scout and report back to the sheriff." "At least wait until morning," Prudence urged. "Or send for help first." Owen seemed to consider this, then nodded. "You're right. No sense taking unnecessary risks." His gaze softened as he looked at her. "You're good for us, Prudence. Bring a clear head when mine's all fired up." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Your month's trial is up tomorrow," he continued, his tone deliberately casual. "Thought you might want to discuss your plans." Prudence realized she'd been so caught up in life at the ranch that she'd lost track of time. I hadn't thought about it, honestly." "Children are fond of you," Owen said. "So's Emma of them. Seems a shame to disrupt things if you're amenable to staying on." "Are you asking me to stay, Mr. Baker?" Prudence asked quietly. "Owen," he corrected her. "And yes, I am. Ranch needs you. Children need you." He paused. "I'd like you to stay, Prudence." The simple honesty in his voice touched something deep inside her. "Then I'll stay, Owen." The smile that broke across his face transformed him, erasing years of worry and grief. "Good. That's good news." They stood looking at each other, something unspoken passing between them, until Jacob called from the other room, breaking the moment. "I should start supper," Prudence said, suddenly flustered. "And I need to send a boy to town with a message for the sheriff," Owen agreed. "We'll talk more later." As he headed back outside, Prudence pressed a hand to her racing heart. This was dangerous territory she was entering. Owen Baker was becoming more than just her employer, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. That night, after the children were asleep, Owen and Prudence sat at the kitchen table, a pot of coffee between them. Owen had just returned from riding the boundary line with 2 of his ranch hands. They'd found tracks but no rustlers. "Sheriff says he'll send deputies to patrol the area tomorrow," Owen reported. "Hopefully that'll be enough to discourage them." Prudence nodded, relieved. "I was worried about you." Owen looked surprised, then pleased. "No need. I can handle myself." "Still," Prudence said softly, "the children need you. They've already lost so much." "And you?" Owen asked, his voice low. "What have you lost, Prudence?" The question hit too close to home. Prudence looked away. "Everyone loses something in this life. Some more than others, I think." Owen reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, covered her hand with his. "I don't mean to pry. Just want you to know that whatever brought you to Terlingua, whatever you're running from, you're safe here." Prudence's throat tightened with emotion. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know me." "I know enough," Owen replied steadily. "I know you're kind and patient with my children. I know you work hard without complaint. I know you love your daughter fiercely. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. The rest will come in time, if you're willing to share it. Tears pricked at Prudence's eyes. How long had it been since someone had shown her such understanding, such gentleness? I should check on Emma, she said, withdrawing her hand reluctantly. Owen nodded, accepting her need to retreat. Good night, Prudence. Good night, Owen. That night, Prudence lay awake long after Emma had fallen asleep, her mind racing. Part of her longed to confide in Owen, to unburden herself of the secrets she carried. But the risk was too great. If he knew the truth, would his kindness turn to disgust? Would he send her away to protect his children? She couldn't take that chance. Not yet, perhaps not ever. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Owen had left before sunrise to meet the sheriff's deputies, leaving Prudence alone with the children. She kept them close to the house, watchful and wary despite Owen's assurances that the rustlers would avoid confrontation. Around midday, as Prudence was hanging out another load of laundry, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Expecting to see Owen returning with the deputies, she was alarmed to spot 3 unfamiliar riders cresting the hill. They rode slowly, deliberately, clearly surveying the property. Prudence's heart hammered against her ribs. The rustlers. It had to be. She quickly gathered the children and hurried them inside, barring the door behind them. Jacob, she said, keeping her voice calm despite her fear. I want you to take Elijah, Sarah, and Emma upstairs. Go to your pa's room and lock the door. Don't come out until I call you, no matter what you hear. Understand? Jacob's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded solemnly. Yes, madam. Good boy. Go now, quickly. As the children disappeared upstairs, Prudence retrieved the shotgun Owen kept mounted above the kitchen door. She'd never fired one before, but her father had owned guns, and she knew the basic principle. Break it open, check if it's loaded. It was, snap it shut, aim, and squeeze the trigger. She positioned herself by the front window, partially hidden by the curtain. The riders had reached the yard now and were dismounting by the water trough. They moved with the confident swagger of men accustomed to taking what they wanted. One of them, a burly man with a red bandana covering the lower half of his face, approached the house. Hello, the house, he called. Anybody home? Prudence remained silent, praying they would think the place deserted and move on. No such luck. After a moment, the man nodded to his companions. Check the barn and outbuildings. I'll take the house. As the man mounted the porch steps, Prudence steeled herself. She would not let these men harm the children. She would not let them take what belonged to Owen. The door handle rattled as the man tried it. Then there was a pause before the butt of a rifle slammed against the wood, trying to force it open. Prudence raised the shotgun to her shoulder, aiming at the door. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was firm. Suddenly, the sound of more horses approaching cut through the air. The man on the porch froze, then cursed. Riders coming. Mount up, he shouted to his companions. Through the window, Prudence watched in relief as the rustlers scrambled for their horses. They were halfway across the yard when Owen and 3 deputies galloped into view, rifles raised. Hold it right there, the sheriff bellowed. What followed was a brief but intense exchange of gunfire. Prudence dropped to the floor, heart in her throat, praying that Owen wouldn't be hit. The children must have heard the shots because Sarah started crying upstairs, her wails piercing through the chaos. When the shooting stopped, Prudence cautiously raised her head to look out the window. 2 of the rustlers were on the ground, wounded but alive. The 3rd was being handcuffed by a deputy. And Owen, thank God, was dismounting, unharmed. Prudence unbarred the door with shaking hands and stepped onto the porch, still clutching the shotgun. Owen spotted her immediately and rushed forward, his face pale with concern. "Prudence, are you all right? The children, we're fine," she assured him, her voice unsteady. "The children are upstairs, locked in your room." Relief washed over Owen's features. Without warning, he pulled Prudence into a fierce embrace, the shotgun trapped awkwardly between them. "When I saw them riding toward the house," his voice was rough with emotion, "I thought I might lose you all." Prudence melted into his embrace, the fear and tension of the past hour dissolving in the security of his arms. "We're safe. You came back in time." Owen pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands still gripping her shoulders. "You were ready to defend them. It wasn't a question." Prudence nodded. "I would have done whatever necessary." Something shifted in Owen's gaze, a deepening respect and something that made Prudence's breath catch. For a moment, it seemed as if he might kiss her, right there on the porch with the sheriff's deputies looking on. Instead, he gently took the shotgun from her hands. "Let's get the children. They must be terrified." The aftermath of the Rustler incident brought unexpected changes to the Double B Ranch. The sheriff's posse tracked down the rest of the gang, recovering the stolen cattle and bringing a sense of security back to the area. Owen installed new locks on all the doors and added a second guard dog to patrol the yard at night. But the most significant change was in his relationship with Prudence. Though nothing explicitly romantic had occurred between them, there was a new awareness, a current of possibility that hummed in the air whenever they were together. Owen sought her opinion on ranch matters, lingered over meals to talk with her, and sometimes their hands would brush as they passed items at the table, the brief contact sending ripples of warmth through Prudence's body. The children noticed the shift as well. Jacob asked outright one evening, "Do you like Pa, Mrs. Lawrence?" Prudence nearly dropped the plate she was washing. Of course I like your father, Jacob. He's a good man and a good employer." Jacob fixed her with a look far too knowing for his 7 years. "That's not what I meant." Elijah, never one to miss an opportunity to tease, started singing, "Pa and Mrs. Lawrence, sitting in a tree, Kissing." "Elijah Baker," Prudence scolded, her cheeks burning. "That's quite enough of that, thank you." Sarah, not to be outdone, tugged at Prudence's skirt. "Are you going to be our new mama?" she asked hopefully. The innocent question hit Prudence like a physical blow. "No, Sarah. I'm your housekeeper. That's all." But was it? The question haunted Prudence as May turned to June and the Texas heat settled over the ranch like a blanket. She found herself watching Owen when he didn't notice the way he listened intently to his children's stories at dinner, how his strong hands turned gentle when he lifted little Emma, who had become a favorite of his, the rare but devastating smile that transformed his solemn face. She was falling in love with him. The realization came to her one evening as she watched him reading to the children on the porch. Emma nestled in the crook of his arm as if she belonged there. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror, because loving Owen Baker meant he deserved the truth. And the truth could destroy everything. It was Emma's first birthday that forced Prudence's hand. She had mentioned the upcoming milestone to Owen, and to her surprise, he insisted on making it a special occasion. "First birthdays should be celebrated," he declared. "We'll have a proper party. Invite some of the neighboring families with little ones." Prudence protested that it was unnecessary, but Owen was determined. "Emma's part of this household now. We celebrate birthdays in this family. This family." The words lodged in Prudence's heart like both a gift and a warning. The day of the party dawned clear and hot. Owen had invited 3 families from nearby ranches, each with young children. The women arrived early to help with preparations, bringing dishes to share and small gifts for Emma. Prudence found herself welcomed into their circle without reservation, accepted as Owen Baker's housekeeper and, Perhaps something more. Owen's different since you came, observed Martha Pullman, wife of a neighboring rancher. As they arranged food on the outdoor tables Owen had set up under the shade trees. Lighter somehow. It's good to see. Prudence busied herself with a plate of biscuits, avoiding Martha's knowing gaze. Mr. Baker is a good employer. I'm glad to hear he seems well. Martha chuckled. Mr. Baker, is it? Still keeping things proper, I see. She patted Prudence's arm. Don't worry, dear. Everyone approves. Catherine would have wanted him to find happiness again. Before Prudence could formulate a response, the men returned from inspecting Owen's new bull, and the yard filled with the happy chaos of children playing. Owen sought her out immediately, his eyes finding hers across the crowd with unerring accuracy. Everything looks wonderful, he told her, his voice low and meant only for her. Thank you for letting me do this for Emma. I should be thanking you, Prudence replied, touched by his thoughtfulness. It's far more than I expected. Owen reached out, briefly touching her cheek with calloused fingers. You deserve good things, Prudence. Both of you do. The tenderness in his touch, in his words, nearly undid her. Owen, Pa! Jacob interrupted, running up to them. Mr. Pullman says it's time for the cake. The moment broken, Owen smiled at his son. Well, we can't keep the birthday girl waiting, can we? The celebration continued with cake and presents. Emma, adorable in a new dress Prudence had sewn for the occasion, seemed bewildered by all the attention but delighted with the wooden toys the Baker children had helped their father make for her. As the afternoon wore on, clouds began gathering on the horizon, promising a summer storm. The guests departed with thanks and well wishes, leaving the Baker family and Prudence to clean up as the first distant rumbles of thunder sounded. They had just finished bringing everything inside when the storm broke in earnest. Rain lashed at the windows, and lightning illuminated the darkened landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. The children, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep quickly despite the storm's fury. Prudence found Owen in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the rain-swept yard. The party was wonderful, Owen, she said softly. Thank you again. He turned, his face half in shadow. It felt right, celebrating with everyone, like we're building something here. He paused, then asked, Are you happy at the Double B, Prudence? Truly happy? The directness of the question caught her off guard. Yes, she answered honestly. Happier than I've been in a very long time. Owen set down his glass and moved toward her. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next. Prudence's heart began to race. Owen, let me finish, he said gently. I know there's something in your past you're not ready to share. I respect that. We all have chapters we'd rather keep closed. He took her hands in his. But I want you to know that whatever it is, it doesn't change how I feel. How we all feel. How do you feel? Prudence whispered, hardly daring to hope. Like we were incomplete before you and Emma came, Owen said simply. Like you were the missing pieces we didn't know we were looking for. Tears welled in Prudence's eyes. I've been running for so long, she admitted. Always looking back, always afraid. Owen's thumbs brushed away the tears that spilled onto her cheeks. Then stop running. You don't need to run from your past, Prudence. Run toward our future instead. The words unlocked something inside her. With a small sob, Prudence leaned into him, and Owen's arms came around her, strong and sure. When his lips found hers, the kiss was gentle at first, a question. Prudence answered by winding her arms around his neck, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. I love you, Owen murmured against her hair when they finally broke apart. I think I've loved you since I saw you standing in Wilson's store, looking so determined and afraid all at once. I love you too, Prudence confessed. But Owen, there are things you don't know. Shoo, he soothed. Not tonight. Tonight is for us, for this beginning. He kissed her again, more insistently. The rest will keep until morning. Prudence knew she should insist, should tell him everything now before they went any further. But the storm outside and the storm of emotion within her made it impossible to think clearly. Tomorrow, she promised herself as Owen's kisses trailed down her neck. Tomorrow she would tell him everything and face whatever came. Morning arrived with clear skies and a sense of possibility that made Prudence's heart both light and heavy. She rose early, leaving Emma still sleeping, and found Owen already at the kitchen table, coffee in hand. "Good morning," he said, his smile intimate in a way that made her blush. "Good morning." She accepted the cup he poured for her, their fingers brushing in a deliberate caress. "The children will be up soon," Owen noted. "But I wanted a moment with you first." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Last night wasn't a dream, was it?" Prudence squeezed his hand. "No, it wasn't a dream." "Good." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "Because I meant what I said, Prudence. I love you. I want to build a life with you and Emma, alongside Jacob, Elijah, and Sarah. A real family." Owen, Prudence began, knowing the time had come. But before she could continue, the sound of an approaching horse interrupted them. Owen frowned, rising to look out the window. Who could that be at this hour? A chill of premonition ran down Prudence's spine. She joined Owen at the window, peering out to see a well-dressed man dismounting in the yard. Something about his bearing confident, authoritative set off warning bells in her mind. "Stay inside," Owen told her, reaching for his hat. "I'll see what he wants." "No!" Prudence grabbed his arm. "Owen, wait. I need to tell you something first." The urgency in her voice made him pause. "What is it?" But it was too late. A knock sounded at the door, sharp and demanding. Owen gave her a puzzled look before moving to answer it. Prudence stood frozen in the kitchen as Owen greeted the visitor, their voices carrying clearly from the front room. "Owen Baker? I'm Marshal James Harrington from Boston. I'm looking for a woman named Prudence Lawrence. I have reason to believe she might be in this area." Prudence closed her eyes, the moment she had dreaded for months finally upon her. When she opened them again, Owen was standing in the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. "This man says he's looking for you," Owen said quietly. "Says it's official business." Prudence nodded, resigned. "I know why he's here." "Mrs. Lawrence," the marshal acknowledged, stepping into view. He was a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes. "You've led me quite a chase. What's this about?" Owen demanded, looking between them. "Prudence hasn't done anything wrong." Marshal Harrington raised an eyebrow. "Is that what she told you?" "Mrs. Lawrence is wanted for questioning in connection with the murder of her father-in-law, Senator William Lawrence, in Boston last December." Owen's face paled. "Murder? It's not what you think," Prudence said quickly, her voice shaking. "Owen, please." "The senator was found dead in his study." The marshal continued relentlessly. "Shot through the heart. Mrs. Lawrence disappeared the same night, along with her infant daughter. Very suspicious circumstances." "I didn't kill him," Prudence insisted, tears threatening. "I would never." "Then you won't mind returning to Boston to clear your name," the marshal said smoothly. "I have the necessary papers to take you into custody." Owen seemed to recover from his shock. He moved to stand beside Prudence, his stance protective. "This is my property, Marshal Harrington. You don't take anyone anywhere without explaining a few things first." The marshal's expression hardened. "This is federal business, Mr. Baker. Don't interfere." "It's all right, Owen," Prudence said softly. I'll go with him. But please, let me explain first. The look Owen gave her was complex hurt, confusion, but also a steadfastness that gave her courage. Marshall, my children are still sleeping. I'd appreciate it if you would wait outside while Mrs. Lawrence and I talk privately. Something in Owen's tone, perhaps the quiet authority of a man defending his home, made the marshal reconsider. 10 minutes, he conceded. Then we leave. When they were alone, Owen turned to Prudence, his expression grave. Tell me everything. Prudence took a deep breath. William Lawrence was a powerful man in Boston. A state senator with aspirations for national office. His son, Robert, was my husband. She twisted her hands together. It wasn't a love match. My family had connections Robert's father wanted, and Robert needed a respectable wife to cover his indiscretions. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. He wasn't a good husband. No, Prudence admitted. But I made the best of it. Then I became pregnant with Emma, and everything changed. Robert was furious he hadn't wanted children. He tried to make me lose the baby. Owen's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. I threatened to leave to expose him. That's when William intervened. He said if I gave birth quietly and maintained the proper appearance, he would see that Emma and I were taken care of. Robert would keep his distance. Prudence's voice faltered. It worked for a while, but after Emma was born, William started making other demands. What kind of demands? Owen asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Prudence looked away. He wanted access to Emma, said she was his grandchild, his legacy. But the way he looked at her. She shuddered. I knew it wasn't right. I refused. William threatened to have Emma taken from me, said with his connections, no court would side with me over him. So what happened that night? Owen prompted gently. I was packing to flee when Robert came home drunk. He saw the bags and flew into a rage. We struggled, and his pistol fell from his coat. I grabbed it, just to keep it away from him. Tears flowed freely now. William heard the commotion and came in. When he saw the gun in my hand, he lunged for me. There was a shot. Prudence's voice broke. I don't even know if it was my finger on the trigger or his, but he fell and there was so much blood. Owen's expression had softened. He reached for her, but Prudence stepped back. Robert panicked. He said I had to run, that no one would believe it was an accident. He gave me what money he had on him and told me to go west, as far as I could. Said he would handle things. She wiped at her tears. I was terrified. I took Emma and fled that same night. And now they're saying you murdered him, Owen concluded. Robert must have changed his story, Prudence said bitterly. Claimed I shot his father in cold blood. It would protect the family name better than admitting the truth. Owen was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd heard. Why didn't you tell me this before? The question held no accusation, only a genuine desire to understand. I was afraid, Prudence admitted. Afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you'd turn me away to protect your children. Afraid the law would find me. She looked up at him, anguish in her eyes. And then I fell in love with you, with all of you, and the thought of losing this life we've started to build. Owen crossed the space between them in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms. You're not going to lose anything, he promised fiercely. We'll fight this, Prudence. Together. How? She asked, clinging to him. It's my word against Robert's, and he has wealth, position, connections. And you have me, Owen said simply. And the truth. It has to count for something. The marshal's knock came again, more insistent this time. Time's up, Mrs. Lawrence. Owen released Prudence reluctantly. Pack a bag for yourself and Emma. I'll speak to the marshal. What are you going to do? Prudence asked, hope warring with despair. Owen's expression was determined. Whatever it takes to keep our family together. While Prudence quickly gathered essentials for herself and Emma, who was now awake and fussing, she could hear Owen's deep voice in conversation with the marshal. The children had also awakened, their confused questions adding to the chaos of the morning. When Prudence emerged with Emma on her hip and a small bag in hand, she found Owen explaining the situation to Jacob, Elijah, and Sarah in terms they could understand. Mrs. Lawrence and Emma need to go on a journey with this man, he was saying, his voice calm despite the tension in his shoulders. To help solve a problem. Are they coming back? Sarah asked, her lower lip trembling. Owen met Prudence's gaze over the children's heads. Yes, they are. I promise you that. The marshal cleared his throat impatiently. Mr. Baker, I've agreed to your terms, but we need to leave now if we're to make the afternoon train from Alpine. Owen nodded curtly. Children, say goodbye to Mrs. Lawrence and Emma for now. Then go with Mrs. Reyes. He gestured to the ranch cook's wife, who had arrived for her usual duties and now stood by the kitchen door, her kind face creased with concern. The children's goodbyes nearly broke Prudence's heart. Jacob, solemn and trying to be brave. Elijah, uncharacteristically quiet. And little Sarah, who clung to Prudence's skirts and had to be gently pried away. I'll be back, Prudence promised them, though she had no idea if she could keep that promise. Take care of each other while I'm gone. As Mrs. Reyes led the children away, Owen turned to the marshal. I'll be ready in 5 minutes. My foreman knows what to do in my absence. The marshal frowned. This isn't necessary, Baker. Mrs. Lawrence is my responsibility now. She's my responsibility, Owen corrected, his tone brooking no argument. And I'm coming with you to Boston to make sure she receives a fair hearing. Prudence stared at him in disbelief. Owen, you can't. I can and I will, he interrupted gently. You're not facing this alone, Prudence. Not anymore. The journey east was long and arduous. They traveled by horse to Alpine, then by train to El Paso, where they caught the Transcontinental Railroad heading east. Throughout the journey, Marshal Harrington maintained a professional detachment, treating Prudence with surprising courtesy given the circumstances. Owen was a constant presence at her side, his quiet strength a bulwark against her fear. At night, in the privacy of their shared sleeping compartment, an arrangement the marshal had reluctantly allowed, he held her close, whispering reassurances. We'll get through this, he promised. And then we'll go home all of us together. Prudence wanted desperately to believe him, but as the landscape outside the train windows changed from desert to plains to the rolling hills of the eastern states, dread built inside her. What awaited her in Boston wasn't just a legal battle, but a confrontation with the life she'd fled, a life of stifling social conventions, of powerful men who bent the truth to suit their purposes. What if they don't believe me? She whispered one night as the train rumbled through Ohio. What if they take Emma from me? Owen's arms tightened around her. I won't let that happen, he vowed. I've sent telegrams ahead to a lawyer friend from my army days. He's making arrangements. Prudence lifted her head to look at him in the dim light. What kind of arrangements? Legal counsel for one, Owen explained. And he's looking into Robert Lawrence's background, trying to find anything that might support your story. Thank you, Prudence said softly, touching his cheek, for believing me, for coming with me, for everything. Owen caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Prudence. That's the easiest thing I've ever done. Boston, when they finally arrived, was just as Prudence remembered, crowded, bustling, the air heavy with coal smoke and the tang of the nearby harbor. The marshal escorted them directly to the courthouse, where Prudence was formally charged with the murder of William Lawrence. The judge, an older man with bushy side whiskers and a perpetual frown, set bail at an amount that would have been impossible for Prudence to pay on her own. But Owen stepped forward immediately. "I'll post the bail, Your Honor." The judge peered at him over his spectacles. "And you are?" "Owen Baker, Your Honor. I own a ranch in Terlingua, Texas. Mrs. Lawrence has been employed in my household for the past several months." Owen's steady gaze didn't waver. "I can vouch for her character and provide the necessary funds for her bail." After some deliberation, the bail was accepted, with the condition that Prudence remain in Boston until the trial. They left the courthouse in a state of cautious relief, Emma fussing in Prudence's arms after the long, confusing day. "What now?" Prudence asked as they stood on the courthouse steps, uncertain where to go. "Now we meet with the lawyer," Owen said, guiding her toward a waiting carriage. "And then we find suitable accommodations." The lawyer, Maxwell Thornton, turned out to be a shrewd, energetic man in his 40s with a reputation for taking on difficult cases. He listened carefully to Prudence's account of that fateful night, asking pointed questions about Robert's behavior and the senator's threats. "It's not an easy case," Thornton admitted when she'd finished, "but it's far from hopeless. The Lawrence family has influence, but they're not above the law." He shuffled through some papers on his desk. "Mr. Baker's telegrams prompted me to do some preliminary digging. It seems Senator Lawrence had a history of using his position to silence those who crossed him. And your husband, Mrs. Lawrence, has quite a reputation among certain circles in Boston. Can you find witnesses?" Owen asked. "Someone who might corroborate Prudence's account of Robert's character or the senator's threats?" Thornton nodded thoughtfully. "Possibly. Servants talk, even in the most exclusive households. And I've already located the Lawrence family's former governess, who was dismissed shortly before your marriage, Mrs. Lawrence. She might have valuable insights." As they left the lawyer's office, Prudence felt a flutter of hope for the first time since the marshal had appeared at the ranch. "Do you think we have a chance?" she asked Owen as their carriage made its way through the busy Boston streets. "More than a chance," Owen replied, his confidence unwavering. "Truth has a way of coming to light, Prudence, and we have something the Lawrences don't." "What's that?" Owen's smile was grim but determined. "Nothing left to lose. They're fighting to protect their reputation, their position. We're fighting for our future, for Emma, for the children back home, for each other. That makes us dangerous." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal preparations. Prudence and Owen took rooms at a modest boarding house, where the landlady, Mrs. Finch, quickly became enamored with Emma and offered to watch her during the day while they attended meetings with Thornton. The lawyer proved as good as his word. He uncovered several former Lawrence household employees willing to testify to Robert's violent temper and the senator's controlling nature. Most promising was the discovery of a maid who had been working in the house the night of the shooting and claimed to have heard Robert and his father arguing just before the fatal shot. "She was too frightened to come forward at the time," Thornton explained. "The Lawrences paid off the entire staff to maintain their version of events. But she's willing to testify now, especially since she's moved to Philadelphia and is beyond their immediate influence." As the trial date approached, Prudence found herself increasingly anxious. The Boston newspapers had gotten hold of the story, painting her variously as a gold-digging murderess or a tragic victim, depending on the publication's political leanings. She could feel the stares when she ventured out, hear the whispers behind raised hands. Through it all, Owen remained her rock. He wrote daily letters to the children back in Terlingua, reading their replies aloud to Prudence in the evenings. He accompanied her to every meeting with Thornton, his presence a silent declaration of his support. And at night, he held her when the nightmares came, when the memory of William Lawrence's blood on her hands threatened to overwhelm her. 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Thornton arrived at their boarding house with unexpected news. "Robert Lawrence wants to meet with you," he announced without preamble. Privately, Prudence felt the blood drain from her face. Why? He didn't say. Only that it was of the utmost importance and could potentially change the course of the trial. Owen's expression darkened. "It's out of the question. After everything he's done, I'll meet with him." Prudence interrupted, surprising herself as much as the men. "Prudence, no," Owen protested. "You don't owe him anything." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I know. But if there's any chance this could end things without a trial, without Emma's name being dragged through the newspapers." She took a deep breath. "I have to try." Thornton nodded approvingly. "I've arranged for the meeting to take place in my office tomorrow morning. I'll be in the adjoining room, and Mr. Baker can wait outside the door. One wrong move from Lawrence, and we end it immediately." Owen was clearly unhappy with the arrangement, but he didn't argue further. "I'll be right outside," he promised Prudence. "One word from you and I'm there." The meeting with Robert Lawrence was set for 10 o'clock the following morning. Prudence spent a restless night, memories of her marriage and the fateful night of William's death playing through her mind in an endless loop. When they arrived at Thornton's office, Robert was already waiting. The man who rose from his chair at Prudence's entrance was a shadow of the dashing, confident figure she had married. His face was haggard, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes suggesting many sleepless nights. "Prudence," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for coming." Thornton cleared his throat. "I'll be next door if you need me, Mrs. Lawrence. Mr. Baker will be just outside." When they were alone, Robert gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit." Prudence remained standing. "Say what you came to say, Robert." He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I deserved that. I deserve far worse, actually." He moved to the window, staring out at the Boston skyline. "I've come to make things right, Prudence. Or as right as they can be, given what's happened." "By dropping the charges?" Prudence asked, not daring to hope. Robert turned to face her. "Yes, I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. Father's threats, my behavior toward you and Emma, the struggle that night." His voice broke. "I never meant for any of this to happen. When Father fell, I panicked. Thought only of protecting myself, the family name." Prudence stared at him, stunned by this unexpected capitulation. "Why now? After all this time, all the lies, why tell the truth now?" "Because I'm dying," Robert said simply. "Consumption. Doctors give me 6 months at most." He gave a bitter laugh. "Ironic, isn't it? Father spent his life building a legacy, and now there will be no one to carry the Lawrence name forward." Prudence felt a complex mix of emotions: pity, anger, relief. "I'm sorry about your illness," she said finally. "But that doesn't excuse what you've done." "No, it doesn't," Robert agreed. "Nothing could. But I can try to make amends before the end." He moved closer, his expression earnest. "I've already spoken to the district attorney, made a full statement. The charges against you will be formally withdrawn this afternoon." Prudence swayed slightly, overwhelmed by this sudden turn of events. "Just like that." "Just like that," Robert confirmed. "You're free, Prudence. Free to return to Texas, to your new life." His gaze was questioning. "The man waiting outside, he's more than just your employer, isn't he?" "Yes," Prudence admitted, seeing no reason to lie. "He is." Robert nodded, a flicker of something like regret crossing his face. "Good. I'm glad. You deserve happiness, Prudence. You always did." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "There's one more thing. Father's will left a trust for Emma. As his only grandchild, She's entitled to a considerable inheritance. This contains all the legal documents, already signed and notarized. Prudence took the envelope cautiously. Why would you do this? Because it's hers by right, Robert said. And because I hope that someday, when she's old enough to understand, you might tell her that her father tried, at the end, to do one decent thing in his miserable life. Tears pricked at Prudence's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Not for the man Robert had been during their marriage, but for the man standing before her now, humbled by mortality and seeking redemption too late. I'll tell her, Prudence promised. Not the worst of it, but enough to know that you tried to make things right. Robert's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. He picked up his hat from the desk. I should go. The DA is expecting me to sign the final paperwork. He paused at the door. Goodbye, Prudence. Be happy. And then he was gone, leaving Prudence standing alone in the office, the envelope clutched in her trembling hands. A moment later, the door opened again, and Owen rushed in, his face concerned. Are you all right? What happened? Prudence looked up at him, tears flowing freely now. It's over, she whispered. Robert's dropping the charges. I'm free. Understanding dawned on Owen's face, followed by pure, unrestrained joy. He swept Prudence into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that drove the air from her lungs. Free, he repeated, setting her down gently. Free to come home. Home. The word resonated through Prudence's very being. Home to Terlingua, to the Doubleby Ranch, to Jacob, Elijah, and Sarah. Home to the life she and Owen had begun to build together. There's something else, she said, showing him the envelope. Money for Emma. A trust from her grandfather's estate. Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unexpected. Robert is dying, Prudence explained quietly. I think he wants to set things right before the end. Owen's expression softened with understanding. Then we should honor that intention. The money will secure Emma's future, perhaps help with her education someday. Prudence nodded, tucking the envelope away. Can we go home now? I miss the children. I miss the ranch. I miss our life. Owen took her hands in his expression suddenly serious. There's something I need to ask you first. Something I've been carrying since we left Texas. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather pouch. From it, he extracted a simple gold band. This was my mother's, he explained, his voice husky with emotion. Pa gave it to me before he died. Said I should save it for when I found someone worthy of it. Prudence's breath caught as Owen sank to one knee before her. Prudence Lawrence, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You've brought light back into my life, into my children's lives. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Emma's mother, a mother to Jacob, Elijah, and Sarah. Through her tears, Prudence smiled. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Owen. With all my heart, yes. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her finger. When Owen rose and kissed her, Prudence felt a sense of completion, of rightness, that she had never experienced before. Let's go get Emma, she said when they finally broke apart. And then let's go home. The journey back to Texas seemed to pass in half the time of their eastward trip, buoyed as they were by relief and happiness. They sent telegrams ahead to the Doubleby, announcing their return and the happy news of their engagement. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Terlingua, the Baker children were waiting at the general store, practically vibrating with excitement. The moment Prudence stepped down, she was engulfed in a tangle of small arms, all three children trying to hug her at once. We missed you so much, Sarah cried, clinging to Prudence's skirts. Did you really catch the bad guys? Elijah asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Jacob, ever the oldest, maintained a bit more dignity, though his smile threatened to split his face. Pa wrote that you're going to be our new ma. Is it true? Prudence knelt down to their level, balancing Emma on her hip. Yes, it's true. If that's all right with you three. We already decided it was, Jacob informed her solemnly. Even had a vote about it. Owen, who had been watching this reunion with undisguised emotion, laughed. A vote, huh? Was it unanimous? Yep, Elijah declared. Even Sarah said yes, and she's been real picky about things lately. Sarah looked indignant. I am not picky. I just like things my way. The familiar bickering warmed Prudence's heart. This was her family now: Owen, the 3 Baker children, and Emma. Bound not by blood but by something stronger: choice, love, and the promise of a shared future. Owen and Prudence were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Terlingua. The ceremony was simple but joyful, attended by neighbors from the surrounding ranches and a few townspeople who had come to know and respect the Baker family. Prudence wore a new dress of pale blue silk, a luxury purchased with a small portion of Emma's trust money, which Owen had insisted she use for the occasion. The Baker children stood proudly beside them during the ceremony. Emma balanced on Jacob's hip, watching with wide eyes as her mother and the man who would now be her father exchanged vows. I, Owen, take you, Prudence, to be my lawfully wedded wife. Owen's deep voice carried clearly through the small church. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When Prudence repeated the vows, her voice was steady and sure. This was no marriage of convenience or social expectation, as her first had been. This was a union born of genuine love, mutual respect, and shared dreams. By the power vested in me, the preacher concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Owen's kiss was tender but passionate, a promise of all that lay ahead. The children cheered, and even baby Emma seemed to understand the significance of the moment, cooing happily in Jacob's arms. The celebration continued back at the Doubleby Ranch, where tables had been set up under the shade trees, laden with food contributed by neighbors and friends. There was music and dancing, laughter and stories, and through it all, Owen kept Prudence close, as if afraid she might somehow disappear. Happy, Mrs. Baker? He murmured in her ear as they swayed to a slow fiddle tune, the children playing nearby under the watchful eyes of Martha Pullman. Happier than I ever imagined possible, Prudence replied, leaning into his embrace. It feels like a dream. Not a dream, Owen assured her. Just the beginning of the rest of our lives. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Owen gathered everyone's attention by tapping a spoon against his glass. I want to thank you all for sharing this day with us, he began, his arm securely around Prudence's waist. Many of you have known me since Catherine passed, have seen the struggle to keep this ranch going, to raise the children alone. He paused, emotion making his voice rough. I thought that chapter of my life, the one where I was truly happy, had ended. But then Prudence and Emma came into our lives, and I learned that sometimes the best chapters are the ones you never expected to write. He turned to look at Prudence, his eyes filled with love. When Prudence first came to the Doubleby, she was running from her past. I told her to run toward our future instead. His smile deepened. I'm grateful beyond words that she took that advice. Cheers and applause followed his words. Prudence, too moved to speak, simply reached up to kiss him again, sealing the promise of their shared tomorrow. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were finally asleep, Owen and Prudence stood on the porch of their home, looking out at the star-filled Texas sky. It's strange, Prudence mused, nestled against Owen's side. When I fled Boston, I thought I was running toward nothing, just away from danger. I never imagined I was actually running toward everything I'd ever wanted. Owen pulled her closer. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of let us exactly where we need to be. He kissed the top of her head. I'm just grateful your running brought you to my door. Prudence smiled, thinking of the long road that had led her to this moment, this man, this family. Not running anymore, she murmured. Home at last. And she was, in Owen's arms, with their children sleeping peacefully under one roof. Prudence had found more than just safety or security. She had found belonging. The past, with all its shadows, could no longer touch her here. The future, their future, stretched before them, bright with promise. The Texas night wrapped around them like a blanket as they stood together, husband and wife, the Baker family complete at last. 5 years later, the Doubleby Ranch had prospered beyond Owen's wildest expectations. With Prudence by his side and Emma's trust providing capital for improvements, they had expanded their operations, added more acreage, and built a reputation for some of the finest cattle in the region. Their family had grown as well. 2 years after their wedding, Prudence had given birth to twin boys, Samuel and Thomas, who at 3 years old were already showing signs of their father's quiet determination and their mother's compassion. The older children had thrived under Prudence's care. Jacob, now 12, was his father's right hand on the ranch, showing a natural aptitude for the business side of ranching. Elijah, 10, was still mischievous but channeled his energy into training the ranch horses, revealing a remarkable gift for working with even the most difficult animals. Sarah, 8, was a motherly little soul who doted on her younger brothers and adored school, bringing home books by the armful from the new schoolhouse in Terlingua. And Emma, now 6, had blossomed into a bright, curious child who followed Owen everywhere, declaring her intention to be just like Pa. When she grew up, a sentiment that never failed to bring a suspicious moisture to Owen's eyes. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on the expanded front porch watching the children play in the yard, Prudence reached for Owen's hand. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? She asked softly. If Mr. Wilson had given me the mercantile position that day? If you hadn't offered me a place here? Owen squeezed her hand. Sometimes. Then I remember what my pa used to say about how the important roads in life don't always look important when you're standing at the crossroads. Prudence smiled, leaning against his shoulder. I was so afraid that day. Afraid of you. Afraid of being alone on a ranch miles from town. Afraid of what might happen to Emma and me if things went wrong. And now? Owen asked, his voice warm with affection. Now I know it was the best decision I ever made, Prudence replied, watching as Jacob helped little Thomas climb onto the wooden horse Owen had carved. Saying yes to you, to this life. Owen slipped his arm around her, pulling her close. We've built something good here, haven't we? Better than good, Prudence corrected him. Something wonderful. As the sun dipped toward the Chizos Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Prudence reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the frightened young widow fleeing Boston with a baby in her arms to the confident woman she was now, wife, mother, respected member of the community. She had stopped running long ago, had embraced the future Owen had promised her that stormy night. And that future had unfolded more beautifully than she could have ever imagined. Rich with love, family, and the deep contentment that comes from finding where you truly belong. Mama, Pa, look what I found, Emma called, running toward them with something clutched in her small hands. As their daughter approached, her face alight with discovery, Owen and Prudence exchanged a glance of pure happiness. This was their legacy, not land or cattle or money, but these children, this family they had forged together against all odds. Show us, sweetheart, Owen encouraged, lifting Emma onto his lap. And as the family gathered on the porch to examine Emma's treasure, a perfect butterfly with wings the color of the Texas sunset, Prudence knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the end of one journey is simply the beginning of a far greater adventure. An adventure called home.